Good morning, and welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church in person and online worship. Whether today is your first time here or you've been coming for years, we're so glad that you're with us. My name is Barbara Freeman. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a member of this congregation and involved in lots of the fun activities like Saturday morning's garden cleanup and all the other ways I'm reminded of what a great community we are. We are a growing community that transforms lives through the power of love. Our mission calls us to celebrate diversity, encourage spiritual growth, and promote social responsibility while we travel on and care for the earth. A special welcome to those at home who are joining us on Zoom today. If you're attending for the first time, please go to our website and fill out the welcome card so that we can know more about you. I do have some announcements this morning. First and foremost, the Ministerial Search Committee, invites you to give your input on your perceptions and visions for the congregation as we move through the next several years. We'll have 2 cottage meetings, today and next Sunday, right after our service in rooms 7 and 9. We'll get you started with a couple pertinent questions and look forward to hearing from you. These in-person meetings will run about 45 minutes, and we will have childcare for you. We'll also host a Zoom meeting this Wednesday, November 8th, at 7 p.m. The Zoom link is in your email news, and we'll send it out again on the day before. If you're not available to attend any of these meetings, we'll also have an online form available later this week. But please join us, and thank you. I have a reminder that Reverend Tara will be on leave beginning this Thursday until Thanksgiving, and she has availability for in-person and Zoom meetings this Tuesday. Are you making your Thanksgiving plans? Or maybe don't have any? Reverend Tara will be hosting the 2nd annual Thanksgiving Day Zoom gathering, Thursday, November 23rd at 10 a.m. All are welcome. No turkey served. A vegan gathering. Now we invite you to take this opportunity to silence your cell phones so that we can be fully present to one another. After the service, please grab a cup of coffee in the kitchen window and stay for conversation in the foyer, probably not out on the lawn, but best of all, down the hall in rooms 7 and 9 for the gathering. But we encourage you to find someone that you've never met before and introduce yourself. Those on Zoom may stay on and connect with one another. And now, let us center our hearts and minds with the ringing of the chimes.
Good morning, church. Good morning. It's so good to see you. My name is Reverend Tara. For those of you I haven't met before, my pronouns are she, her, and they, them, and I'm the transitional minister here at Allen Avenue UU Church, fondly known as A2U2. Our time together this morning is a time set apart. A time made sacred by the fact that we are here together. This morning, we will reflect on the stories we tell, the narratives we find ourselves living in and living out, and the ways in which we as people of faith are called to interrogate these stories, aligning new tellings more deeply with our closest held values so that we might be agents of truth and change in our lives and in the wider world. Come into this space where all are welcome, all are needed, and all are loved. Come, you are joyfully called to worship. Our chalice lighting words this morning are by Leah Ongiri. And as we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, those worshiping at home are invited to grab a candle or a chalice, put it near you, and light it as well so we might be connected to one another. Here we are together, each facing our different human tasks, or maybe the same central one, to embrace the lessons life delivers, to discern and respond as we grow, to refuse harm and cherish flourishing. May we know ourselves as vessels of infinite possibility, holders of each other's heartaches and tales of joy alike, weavers of one story in which we each have a part. And we light a second candle this morning, a candle of community, for the continued healing of those affected by violence in our main community, in Palestine and Israel and throughout the world. Let us take a breath together. Our opening hymn is number 1 in your gray hymnal. May nothing evil cross this door. And we ended our service last week with this hymn, and I thought it'd be nice to sing it again. So, as Dale plays it through once so we can hear the tune, let us rise in body or in spirit, and we'll join our voices as one. So I have a few questions I want to ask you this morning for our time for all ages, and it truly is for all ages. So kids, answer my questions. Grown up, answer my questions. You might not have an answer because you might not know the answer. but they're sort of the kind of questions that we just sort of are doing a think aloud together. So the first question I was wondering is, how many of you know the story of the Good Samaritan? Quite a few. Can anybody tell me what happens in that story? So you, okay, so you don't know it. Yes. Yep. Yes, exactly. So I'll repeat that for those who couldn't hear. There's a man who's hurt, and several people pass him by, and then the Samaritan is the one who stops and helps him. Any other? No.
I think there's something about the Samaritan not being of that community, and people who were of the community passed by, and that's why it's
Yes.
called the Good Samaritan instead of just the good guy.
Exactly. So I can't remember where the person who was harmed was from, but someone from his community walks by, someone from another community walks by, and then the Samaritan was from another community, and the Samaritan responded.
And that's critically, isn't it religious leadership that walks by?
A rabbi walks by. Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but that's okay. So one of the things that those of us who stay in the sanctuary this morning, one of the things we're going to talk about is this idea of stories that become part of how we understand the world, even if they're not necessarily the most important religious stories to us, how they become part of our culture and impact how we see and live in the world. One of the things about stories is that stories are often made up from language. And we remember that the words we use, the language we use matters. And I was thinking, does anybody use the term caretaking? Raise your hand. How about the word caregiving? Not as much? Are there any of you who use one but not the other, or do you use them interchangeably? Interchangeably for the most part. So in the same way that the words we use matter and that the stories influence us, I think that sometimes the words we use influence how we think about things. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about these two terms and the way that the idea of caretaking could perhaps be received as one person having more power than the other and taking some agency away from someone else in sort of a power dynamic that's like, I'm the healer, you're the recipient of the care. And so I've been trying to not say that. And one could argue, well, it's just a word, it doesn't really matter. But when I think about the word caregiving, it feels a little bit more reciprocal. It feels a little bit more like you're receiving something from me, I'm probably receiving something from you, which better reflects what I understand relationships of care to be about. I don't know about you. Rick?
Some people use the term care partnering.
Yes, some people use the term care partnering, which is probably the most reciprocal and sort of egalitarian one that I've heard. That's a beautiful term. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Taking. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, for me, caretaking is when you take care of a property.
Ah,
It's for people.
got it. Caretaking could be taking care of a property, something that you're not necessarily in as reciprocal a relationship with. And caregiving could be taking care of people. Mike?
My interpretation of the two was exactly opposite. I view caregiving as, here, take this.
Yep. Mike's complicating it with the opposite. Again, wasn't planning on that. Yeah.
I mean, isn't it possible that caretaker is something that, for most of the sort of existence of that word, people would have just understood to mean what you're suggesting caregiving means?
Yes.
So it wasn't. It's just a question of like how people interpret and think of the word.
Absolutely. You're basically got my sermon. So for those who didn't hear, one of the questions is something along the lines of, isn't this just interpretation and is this actually a thing? Great question. So all that to say, what we're talking about today is the role of language and stories and meaning making in helping us to live out our values and not just take the words that we've been given and the stories we've been given at face value, but to really do the work of asking hard questions and seeing, okay, how does this actually land for me? What does it mean for me? And then how might I live my values in the world based on that sort of restorying or re-narrative creation? That's what I got for you today. So at this time, I'm going to invite up Carrie, who will be our lamplighter, and those who are participating in RE will follow her out in just a moment. So a lamplighter, this morning, Carrie, is entrusted to transfer the light of the sanctuary chalice into the lamp and then go forth into RE spaces, religious education spaces, where they will light the chalices there. So those who are going to RE are invited to follow the lamplighter as you carry the flame, expanding our sacred space.
We are a freely gathered, open and welcoming faith community supported by your contributions. Each week, 1/3 of our offering is given away to a nonprofit organization whose mission aligns with our Unitarian Universalist values. This month's Share the Plate recipient is My Place Teen Center, a free year-round after-school program in Westbrook, offering comfort, meals, resources, and hope for kids ages 10 to 18. You can find more information in your order of service. Donations can be made now as a basket is passed through the donate button on our website, or if you are a member, on Breeze. If giving through Breeze, please note if the donation is your pledge or a gift to our Share the Plate. If you are visiting us for the first time this morning, please know that your presence is your gift to us. At this time, our offering will be collected and gratefully received.
Our reading this morning is excerpts from a blog post entitled Living Through the Unveiling by, probably you know by now, one of my favorites, Adrienne Marie Brown. She writes, "Things are not getting worse. They are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. It certainly feels like this is worse. I say feels like because as a radical, I am not certain that's true. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it's not true. Everything has always been woefully incremental. So why now does it feel like this? Perhaps the number one privilege of being an American is our narrative. We have a story that covers all of our wretched behavior that makes us exceptional regardless of what we do. We've gotten lost in that story. We have been working in silos, each of us digging deep down into our own particular issues, our own particular numbers, and making a case for why there's a crisis. So, what feels new is the unveiling. The heaviness is the increasing weight of the truth becoming undeniable as more people believe it. Right now, more and more of the truth of this country and this world at this time is visible, left naked, made obvious. We no longer have the luxury of pretending we can change minds with logic or survive the pendulum swing of universal survival issues made partisan. We have to be willing to engage in radical resistance and radical futuring. Because people are looking at us like, well, you were right, now what do we do? We must increase our collective tolerance for truth. We must deepen our connections to each other. We must take the risk of leading. Not only are we the ones we have been waiting for, but this is the exact moment we have been shaped for. And even though it came so quickly, it has actually taken forever. But here we are in this moment, the present moment, naked and messy and visible right down to our roots. The veil never hid us from others. It only ever hid us from ourselves. Now that more of us can see who we truly are, we must continue to move towards who we truly want and need to be in order to sustain life on this planet. Liberation is no small task. It is appropriately daunting for miraculous beings. It is a gift to be given such undeniable purpose, such immense odds.
Though I may speak with the tongue
things are not getting worse. Adrienne Marie Brown writes, they are getting uncovered. And we are living through a great unveiling. I've been thinking a lot the last few weeks about the role of church in our lives. You have thought about that some too, I'm sure. Through our first round of conversations about covenant this fall, through deciding whether or not to come the Sunday after the mass shooting, you'll think about it again in the upcoming listening circles with our minister search team. Church plays many roles, different for all of us: community, inspiration, connection and belonging, grounding for our justice work, friends, an avenue to be of use in the world, a place to practice dealing with the challenges and conflict and having hard conversations, somewhere to teach our children values and offer them tools for faithful living, and so much more. Another one of the roles that church ought to play in our lives is to be a site of meaning making, a place where together we can make meaning out of what's happening in our lives and in the wider world through the lens of our shared faith. And of course, in Unitarian Universalism, that is no small task, given that for each of us, as many people who are here in this room, faith means something a little different. But we do have things in common. We have our principles, and we have our emerging core values: generosity, pluralism, justice, interdependence, equity, and transformation, with love at the center. One of the ways that we understand our lives and the world, as we talked about earlier, is through narratives, through stories. What is the story we are telling about what's happening in our lives, consciously or unconsciously? What larger stories and narratives do we fall into, perhaps without even thinking about whether we agree? Are there cultural narratives we should be questioning and perhaps even restorying and retelling, more in line with who we want to be? You can probably guess that my answer to all of the above is yes. And as Brown says, we must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. And so what does it look like to pull back the veil? Probably it looks like a lot of things. And one of them for religious communities is to look truthfully at our stories, the cultural narratives we live in and live out, through the lens of our faith. Ask questions, the hard ones, and do the brave theological work of reassigning meaning and rewriting our story. During the Black Lives Matter uprisings of 2020, I learned a term that is helping me grapple with how hard it is to make meaning out of what is happening in our world. The term is spiritual impasse. Spiritual impasse. Healing justice practitioner Raquel Faithful offers a beautiful definition, describing spiritual impasse as the point at which an individual or a community hits the limit of how they've been approaching something and are stuck in their ability to take meaningful action or find a way forward. Instead, they are going in circles, repeating unworkable approaches. Sound familiar? The root of this difficulty, she writes, is that the established framework of meaning and values is not adequate to the present reality. To move forward, we must engage in transforming our framework of meaning. In various areas of our collective life, I think we have come to a place of impasse. This morning, I'm going to focus on systemic racism, but you can ask the same questions and do the work of restoring with any of the injustices that plague us as a society right now. Gun violence, transphobia, fascism, climate change, you name it. We have come to a place of impasse. We repeat unworkable approaches with different names: diversity, inclusion, service, missions, none of which have proven adequate to the present reality. Harmful at worst and ineffective at best, our approaches to creating a more just world have yet, in many cases, have yet to reckon with power. They have often been intellectual and solution-based, when what impasse calls for is the work of moral and spiritual reckoning. And this is complex emotional work, theological work. It requires new narratives, and it requires one of my other favorite things, transformation. As a people, we construct our frameworks of meaning, our values, and the understanding of who we are within the culture we live in, of course, and through the teachings and the narratives, explicit and implicit, of our faith traditions. So again, to tell a new story, to reshape the way that we see and understand the world, we have to examine the stories that shaped us. The work of Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker introduced me to a new interpretation of the parable of the Good Samaritan that sparks transformative reflection and restoring. The story as told by Jesus, or whoever wrote as him, we know that's complicated, begins with a man in a ditch. He is in rough shape. The Jewish priest passes by, the Levite passes by, and the Samaritan, perfectly well knowing the man in the ditch was not a fellow Samaritan, but a Jew, stops to help. Many of us, religious or not, know this story in some form about awakening to the suffering of others, reaching out across lines of difference to those who are in need, and it is a worthy lesson. We know this story, not because we are biblical scholars or devout Christians, but because this story has become part of our culture's framework of meaning. Reverend Dr. Parker helped me to see how the parable of the Good Samaritan can establish a dichotomy: the one who helps and the one who is helped. And since we construct our identities within the narratives of our culture, this dichotomy of helper versus helpee can get trapped in our understanding of who we are. We religious liberals, particularly white religious liberals, are taught and raised not only to help, but to be helpers. But the trouble is that our attachment to being a helper, to being seen and thought of as good, is based on somebody needing our help, based on the assumption that it is our help, our ideas, our way of doing things that are needed. It doesn't include the fact that we need help too, that we don't have all the answers. And so, as we reckon with inequality in our world, with race, we have arrived at a spiritual impasse. We are stuck trying to find ways to take meaningful and concrete action. The action many of us have taken, that I have definitely taken, helping, relies on a power dynamic of paternalism, a lack of reciprocity that will never lead to true transformative justice and liberation. Reverend Dr. Parker explains that to get through impasse, not to jump over it or fix it or go around it, but to actually move through it, we have to not only liberate ourselves and each other from these roles and begin to see everybody as a whole person, but we must actually name and own the ways in which we have caused harm, have been harmed, and name and own that we are part of and impacted by the systems responsible for people being in the ditch in the first place. Spiritual and moral reckoning is complex emotional work. It calls us to question who we are, what our role is, to name the power that we have and the ways we have chosen to use it. Sometimes it calls us to let go of that power and to examine and move through our own perfectionism, vulnerability, guilt and shame, resentment and grief. Oh my God, it's so much work. And to do so, motivated not by pity or by a desire to be good or to be forgiven, but by love, and love alone. Now, the bad news for those of us who love to use our brains, I am in that category, is that this is not an intellectual process. We are incredibly smart people, but we will not think our way to justice. It's a pain. The good news about that is that this frees us to be in relationships of reciprocity, to not be caretakers, but care partners. It allows us to be in relationships of interdependence with everybody else. We know we don't have all the answers, but we also know that we are held up by the same love as everybody else. And I truly believe that we have the resources within us and around us for this very transformation, the most important being each other. The most important being each other. And so this morning, I'd like to leave you with the words of someone else. New York Times writer Maeve Higgins, who shares her thoughts on the challenge and the gift of transformation. She writes, "I disagree that this is, in fact, work. Work is chores, and chores get done. This is a lifelong project we get to approach with grace and curiosity and the full understanding that it will be difficult at times and beautiful at times, and any chance we have to take part in it is frankly rather stunning." She says, "I hope you understand that grappling with our past as a collective and imagining a future that is fair is not something you are expected to do alone. You are simply one drop in a new wave, a wave that slips easily into an ocean of people deep and permanent who have long been eroding the cliffs of injustice. You're simply one drop in a new wave, a wave that slips easily into an ocean of people, deep and permanent. May it be so, and amen." Our closing hymn is number 114 in your gray hymnal, Forward Through the Ages. As Dale plays through once, you're invited to rise in spirit or in body and we will sing together. This morning, leave this place knowing just what you are. You're simply one drop in a new wave, a wave that slips easily into an ocean of people deep and permanent who have long been eroding the cliffs of injustice. Friends, our worship has ended. Go in hope and with love. Blessed be.